I remember back when President Bush said of Muslims, specifically of jihadists, what he calls terrorists, that they hate us for our freedoms. Do you remember that? I remember when he said that, and at the time, in my mind, I thought, oh my God, that's just the most ridiculous thing anybody could ever say. Nobody hates somebody because of their freedoms, right? I thought that notion was just so outlandish, it actually made me angry. Yeah, I got my pink panties in a bunch over that statement. Well, it took many years for me to realize, because I went and studied some of the doctrine and some of the historical facts about Islam and some of the main characters of Islam, like Muhammad, to come to the realization that George Bush was actually correct. He was spot on the money. They do actually hate us for our freedoms, not the color of our skin per se, not our economy, not the differences in our ideologies, but they truly do hate freedom. Like Islam, I've come to learn, has it is the antithesis. The antithesis. Sorry, see if I can spit out fancy words today. Ain't happening. Islam is the antithesis of freedom, and any devout Muslim hates freedom because it means they don't get to have control, right? Think about the dichotomy of that. A person who hates freedom hates it because they don't have control over the person who is free, and they resent them for that. Another aspect of that dichotomy could be that they themselves are not free, and they resent seeing someone else be free. However you want to take it. So today, yesterday, or the day before, in fact, Trump tweeted out something about the South African farmers, about white South African farmers whose land is being taken away from them, and who the South African government, the EFF, is calling for the genocide of white people, right? I can't remember the dude's name, but you can find it. It's all over YouTube. He says something to the effect of, we're not calling for the outright slaughter of white people yet. Right? That caveat in there, yet. So, this leads me to the topic of this video, which is that stupid people breed faster than smart people. And so when you've got a nation or an entire continent inhabited by stupid people that cannot feed themselves on their own without outside assistance, who cannot live peacefully with one another on their own without outside interference or influence keeping them stable, then you give them freedom to operate their own lives, they are going to fuck it up every time. And they are going to turn on the people that enabled them to achieve that freedom. White South Africans enabled Africa to feed itself. They enabled Zimbabwe to feed itself. As soon as they were cleansed from Zimbabwe, it only took 10 years for all that land to go fallow and for Zimbabwe to start taking international aid again because it couldn't feed itself. And this ties into the level of IQ that Africans have. Okay, we all know. I mean, let's stop pretending that Africans have a higher IQ than any other race on the planet. No, they don't. If left alone, Africans would still be in the hunter-gatherer stage of life. They wouldn't even approach agriculture yet, because this is what their level of IQ enables them to do. It doesn't enable them to produce agriculture or produce stable societies. It enables them to have tribal collectivism in small groups who are nomadic and who thrive and live by hunting and gathering. Okay, this is what black people's IQ enables them to do. It doesn't enable them to go beyond that. Now, in another environment, you might argue that that the environment can have an influence on the person's level of IQ, well, that's for another discussion. But here today, what I'm trying to point out to you, or paint the picture of, is that history is going to repeat itself. It is beginning to repeat itself. And IQ and birth rates have everything to do with it. Right now, the government of South Africa is populated by who? Well, blacks, who are not very smart because they're deciding to eliminate the very people who enable them to be sustained. In other words, they're biting the hand that feeds them. And the reason they're biting the hand that feeds them is because they resent that they cannot feed themselves. They're too stupid to feed themselves. And so they're going to go after the people who can feed them. And of course, racism comes into the mix. I don't care per se about the racist aspect, although it does trickle into many other aspects of life here in the United States. But for the topic of this video, we're focusing on South Africa and farms and farming and farmers. So throughout history, you'll notice that all the major conflicts that have developed inside of a country or inside of a nation, and we're not talking about foreign invasions. We're talking about conflicts that develop inside of a nation, like they did in South Africa, that resulted in apartheid, which actually worked for some time. But because everybody thought, well, you know what, equity and equality, they got rid of apartheid, and now look what's going on, right? Things were okay for a little while, but as soon as they got rid of apartheid, this stuff comes to a head. And of course, it takes a long time, but conflicts that arise internally. The Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, there's many of them throughout history. The Congo. Who did they go after? They go after the people who produce the food, right? Why? Well, because they're stupid. They're not smart enough to realize that when you go after the people who produce the food, for whatever reason, and it's usually always political, that everybody's going to starve. And that's kind of the idea. You get a population in dire straits, and then you come to it and you say, guess what? I can help you out as long as you sign on the dotted line and you bend to the will of my political party. Well, what do you think's happening with the immigration here in the United States? All the people from Mexico or from South America that are coming up. In Trump's words, not the best and brightest. Obviously, Mexico is not sending us their best and brightest. Okay, I'm sure some of those people are trying to get up here too, but look at what happens. You get immigrants from a third world country. In other words, stupid people that can't take care of themselves. And they come up here and what do? Do they start producing and feeding their neighbors and helping the local community? No. They do just the opposite. They suck up the resources. They're entitled. They take, and they don't give anything back. And then when you do ask for something back in return, they resent you for it because they're stupid and entitled. So, but this is going to keep happening because smart people who pay their taxes, who are self-sufficient, support these people. They keep paying for them. And that's why the people who breed faster than everybody else are always dependent on the people who don't breed as fast as everybody else because they're busy producing. Okay, it's the whole ant and the grasshopper. The ant saves for the cold winter, and the grasshopper just munches down all season long. And then when the winter hits and he's out there freezing and cold and he doesn't have any food, he goes to the ants, and the ants say, "Hey, look, we were busy all season long, buddy, storing and stocking food, and all you do is eat it. So, bye-bye, you're out of here." We need to start being more like the ants, okay? The white South African farmer is the ant, and the rest of the nation is populated with stupid grasshoppers, and they're about to eat everything the ants have got. It's sad, it's tragic, it's history repeating itself, and it's coming to the United States. In case you haven't noticed, what's that saying? I forget who said it. Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. Well, look at what's going on in California with all the water, the fights over water. This ties into agriculture. And of course, You'll also, if you've been paying attention over the last 20 years, notice a trend of moving towards commercial production and moving away from independent, sustainable production. So the small farms are going under. They're being overtaxed, overregulated. You can't produce or sell raw milk. You can't consume raw milk. Not that I'm advocating for that, because, the argument of how healthy it is and what the risk is for another video and another topic. But the point is that the choice is removed, okay? And this also ties in with water. There are story after stories after stories, multiple stories in Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, Washington, where farmers are being threatened, fined, even in rare cases jailed for collecting rainwater on their property to help them sustain their crops. So this is a movement against farming and against self-sufficiency, and it's done by the globalists, the left, the idiots, the powers that be, the stupid people in power. And they're doing it to starve out everybody else so that they can get them under their political control. Well, you look at the Bolshevik Revolution and what wound up happening to all those people. Yeah, they didn't last. Now, this also ties into, not very neatly, but sort of segues into all the activism you see going on. This is why I don't go out, and I've said this in other videos, I don't go to protests and rallies and demonstrations, any of that crap. You know why? Because there's cameras everywhere. Am I paranoid? Not necessarily. But is there anything wrong with that? I don't think so. Charles Manson. Yeah, I'm going to bring up Charles Manson. So ignore the guy who said it, but pay attention to the words that he said. Total paranoia is total awareness. Okay? If you just take a minute and think about that statement, you'll realize it's true. It's universally true. Total paranoia is the same thing. It equates to total awareness. Okay? If you're a totally paranoid person, you're going to be looking everywhere. You're not going to miss anything. You're going to see what's coming down the road. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a good thing. And so I encourage you to look around. Like, get your nose out of your fucking smartphone and look around at what's going on. See the signs that are right there in front of your face. It ain't going to end with the genocide of white South African farmers. There's obviously an anti-white narrative being pushed in the United States today in many facets of life. And if you think it's going to stop with the farmers in South Africa, think again. It ain't. It's going to hit you white farmers, you independent small businesses right here in the United States who are trying to be self-sufficient and being squashed by the globalists that have power over you, by the stupid grasshoppers. Take care, folks.